I've had the privilege of meeting many rich and successful traders. And the number one piece of advice that I've gotten from almost all of them is that patience pays. And as you're going to see in this video, I have one setup in particular to where if I wait for that setup, 9 times out of 10, it's going to pay me, and it's going to pay me quite handsomely too. So it makes more sense for me to actually wait for this setup present and take it rather than taking other setups that aren't as good. But if you want to see me trade live, I stream Monday through Friday starting at 9:15, just 15 minutes before the market opens. All right, so let's start the recap for this past week from July 16th to July 18th. We were actually able to finish off this week with a 72% win rate with 11 trades taken across a couple of accounts, funded accounts. And right here, we have in blue the trades that were actually taken. And then in yellow are the trades that I honestly should have been in that I marked up kind of towards the end of the day. So let's just get right into it. Starting off with the first trade I took in Monday night after the Monday New York session. This is Monday night going into the Tuesday session. I'm basically taking the bounce off of the daily VWAP. Yes, it's not perfectly bouncing off of the daily VWAP, but the key factor is when you're a VWAP trader, you need to treat VWAP as a zone. And right now, I'm seeing buyers are slowly stepping into the zone, especially how we're moving sideways. We see buyers step in here, and then we kind of take this pivot right here. I just see this as buyers taking some liquidity before it's ready to really move higher. And we eventually do move higher. Now, a safer trade could have been to actually wait for the high day VWAP break. But at that point, that would have not occurred until like 3 a.m. and I would have been asleep. But at the same time, I've taken these bounce plays enough to kind of understand and know how to timing them properly. But that is the trade that I took on Monday, and it was a pretty good and quick winner, in my opinion. And then now we can go over to the trade that I definitely should have taken. And this is Monday during the New York session. And as we can start to see on the higher time frame, we clearly see kind of like, buyers and sellers aren't really taking price anywhere up until right after the London Open. And then we see buyers make that push higher. And now we're able to kind of stay above the start of sessions VWAP and then make our way above the monthly VWAP here on the 15-minute time frame. And then going into the New York Open, looking at the lower time frame on the 2-minute chart, we see some structure starting to be developed. It's pretty interesting to see here that we're seeing these higher lows. We break towards the upside of the opening range. We come back. We break higher again. And the reason why I'm not kind of taking a trade anywhere around here is just because we do have that previous day's New York up above us as resistance. And I do want to see a bit more structure form first. But once we actually do get that structure and we're kind of getting to setting the initial balance, we then come back down to retest the start of session VWAP. We form 1, 2, 3 higher lows. So now I feel pretty confident in taking the longs, and I can actually take the high of day anchor to VWAP breakout, which is a nice entry model if you are a VWAP trader. And then you're just taking this breakout, stop, just covering recent structure, and then you can ride it all the way up to the 6307 level. And now moving on to the next day, which is Tuesday. This is a trade to where I took on the futures desk eval. And I did not take any trades this day on my funded account, but I'm going to show you the trades that I honestly should have and why I should have taken them. But basically, what we're basically taking is we see that price is clearly pulling back. We're moving lower, right? And we're seeing that sellers have just been in control the entire New York session. Buyers have tried taking it, but they haven't even been able to take price above the daily VWAP or the New York session VWAP, as we see here on the 15-minute chart right here on the left-hand side. And then because we don't get this nice solid pullback and we make the high day break without really taking that pullback of touching the New York or even interacting with the start of session VWAP, I'm not going to take this trade on my funded account. I'd rather for us to have some type of interaction with VWAP, the blue VWAP or even the white dotted VWAP here before taking these low day breaks, but we never get that. So rather than me taking the trade on the funded account, I decided, hey, why not? Let me just take it on the eval. But these are the trades that I definitely should have taken on my funded account if I was a bit more dialed in. Now, from the open, sellers are clearly in control. Despite the bullish price action that we had pre-market of making strong higher highs and higher lows, right now on the open, we're coming off of a place where we just formed a higher high. So, I mean, it makes sense for us to pull back and we can actually ride that pullback, especially if the most relevant trend is moving lower, and which it actually is. Because if we're analyzing here on the lower time frame, we see that obviously we open up bearish and then sellers just take us outside of the opening range. We have our first break. We come back up to retest the New York anchored VWAP, but we strongly reject this level and get a nice low of day anchored VWAP break. And this should have been a nice entry model that I should have taken a trade on my funded accounts. And we can just ride that all the way down to the 6300s. And that was a really nice kind of like A plus setup right there. And then we have pretty much another one after we do actually touch the New York VWAP at around 10 a.m. We kind of move lower. We're trying to creep back up to get a pullback after we make our way below the previous day's New York VWAP, which is the yellow VWAP right here. And we're not able to make a full pullback all the way back to these two VWAPs here. And that kind of tells us a little something that sellers are really strong. And so again, the trade that I took on my eval account, I honestly should have been, if I'm being honest with myself, I honestly should have been in it on my funded accounts, just because again, we see how strong sellers are today in the New York session. And I can't be fearful, especially when a trade setup this clear and this nice presents. So that was a whoopsie on my part, but this is a really nice trade setup. Again, we don't get a break here. We don't get a break here. We do not get a break here. This is the candle that really breaks and closes below the low of the anchored VWAP. And because of this, we can get in. That's our entry model. We can go ahead and take this price. The reason why we don't get anywhere here is because, again, price is bouncing off of this VWAP rather than breaking it. Our entry model is taking the actual close below, not just, oh, candle close near it, I want to take it. It's not good enough. I need for it to actually somewhat close through this VWAP for me to be able to get in. And then looking at the last and final trade is taking basically the rejection off the previous day's New York VWAP, followed by an entry model of the low of day anchored VWAP break. And again, sellers have just been incredibly strong all day. And then we reject the previous day's New York VWAP. We have these two VWAPs above us as extra resistance. And then we get a nice strong candle closure below the low of the anchored VWAP. And then this trade is going to work out in your favor quite quickly. But now that wraps up Tuesday. And Tuesday was honestly a very eventful day. I mean, clear trend, clear sell off. And it's honestly my fault that I didn't take a trade and didn't make money on Tuesday. To be honest, it was a big whoopsie day. But moving on to Wednesday. Wednesday was kind of a more likely a one and done day. But we did take one trade on my funded account, and I was kind of married to the longs. And the reason why is because on the higher time frame, we see this clear level of support. Every single time we bounce off this level of support, which has been 3 times within the past week, we have made a run to new all-time highs. And that's kind of what I expected price to do. Again, I expect price to kind of repeat what it's already been doing, what it's shown that it wants to do in the past. And I had the read right. I mean, my bias, my analysis, my read was correct. It's just that Papa Trump made a tweet and that really just kind of like shook out the market, threw all the longs off, stop punted everyone, and unfortunately got tapped out, stopped out. And then he said something else later on, and then it went even lower. And then we started to creep higher leading into the next day. So it was just an unfortunate day. These types of events that don't really happen that much. But essentially, what I'm basically hitting it off. Okay, we bounce off this area of support. We broke above the start of session VWAP. We're creeping higher. We reject the previous session New York. That's fine. But I'm seeing buyers kind of like step in here. If we look at lower on the lower time frame, if we really wanted to move lower, we would have took this and continued sliding, but we don't. Look around this zone of the white VWAP here, which is the start of the future session VWAP. You see how price is starting to move sideways, and we're starting to see some bulls step in. That's a sign to me that buyers are stepping in, trying to defend this area. So I'm going to take a swing at the longs. I had my stop at recent structure, which honestly should have held if Trump didn't say anything. And unlucky to me, I mean, I was literally one tick away from taking profit here. And unfortunately, I mean, Trump just tweeted at the worst time in the world that he possibly could. And then the price just quickly retraced, stopping me out before I can hit my TP. Now, one thing that is my fault and I do take accountability for on this trade is that I was going for a bit more than 1R, which I don't normally do. And I was punished for it today on this day. And rather than going for exactly 1R, I went for a 1.09 ratio, just going for a few extra ticks. And that's the thing that quite literally punished me. I should have been out of the trade around here, but I wanted to kind of get a little bit more. And well, let's just say I paid the price for it. It's nothing that I think is bad. I just think again, it's kind of unlucky, bro. It like I have to like sometimes we just have to sit there and not really say as traders, oh man, we could have done this, we could have done that. Sometimes we just get unlucky. It is what it is. We can't predict when Trump's just gonna talk his stuff. And then going on to Wednesday, if I'm being quite honest with myself, I went into this day with a super strong, heavy bias. And if we just look at how the price action ended, I mean, we honestly just should have stayed out the market, to be honest, because we never really had any clear confirmation of the longs other than that just that pure prediction that I had of okay, well, we bounce off this area of support every single time we did that. We always wanted to make a run for all-time highs. So I expect the price to want to do that. I expected us to okay, we have a lot of buyers here that can really push us higher. And I was right in a sense, but again, I don't have the structure to really support my thesis. And so I can honestly say like I was unlucky that, Trump just decided to say a couple things that really drove the market down and we rallied back up after. But at the same time, I can look back at Monday, Tuesday, to where we had clear structure. We broke their opening range high, we pulled back, get on top of a nice high of day anchored VWAP breakout. Those are easy trades to win, and those are easy trades to take. And if I ever lose taking those trades, I'd be okay with it. But trades like this, to where I don't have the best confirmation, for example, even though, yes, we do have the start of session view up down here, we still break the opening range low. Sellers are clearly still in the market. So again, we just don't have that extra confirmation like we had on Tuesday and Monday. And as you're going to see in the next 2 days for Thursday and Friday, we had some really strong confirmation. So I just wanted to highlight that. In all honesty, because I didn't have that confirmation, I honestly probably should have stayed flat going into Wednesday, just because, again, this open is not confirming my long bias, nor are we really truly confirming the shorts either, just because the higher time frame and the lower time frame aren't quite matching up. And it just seems like price isn't quite ready to move in either direction. Now, if we move on to the next day, on Thursday, here are the trades that I took. So this is the trade I took Wednesday night leading into Thursday. And again, we're actually going to take another swing at the longs, and we're basically taking a textbook trade setup. I'm taking a bounce play with two major view ups below me as support, and we're bouncing off of the start of session view up. So the pink view up we have here is the start of week session view up, and then the green view up down here, which is the last view up we have as support, is the all-time high view up anchored at the all-time high price of this year. So basically what we're seeing is that after price made a higher high yesterday, we're pulling back down to the month to day view app. We hold that view app. And then since this bottom pivot right here on the 15-minute chart, we're going to kind of break all above all these view apps here, make a higher high, and then pull back, holding the week to day view app, all-time high view app, and the start of the futures session view app. Like I said, when do I know when buyers are stepping in? Well, it's when we start to kind of slow down on the downward movement. We get a bit more sideways action. We sweep this stop loss right here to kind of get some liquidity. And then now we can kind of see that buyers are now taking price higher, closing back above the start of session VWAP. And as long as we have our stop down at previous structure like we've had, we should be a-okay, because let's just say we do break this structure and we kind of move lower, well, then we wouldn't really want to be in the long anymore, right? So that's where I have my stop loss there. And again, we're trading this into the news, and well, I mean, with such a bullish price action, we just really get that within a couple seconds, especially once the news releases. But it's kind of clear how buyers stepped in on the 15-minute, and then we can also see the pullback starting to slow down and when a good opportunity is to actually get in. Now, an argument can be made is that, well, why didn't I just anchor a high anchor to you up and get it off there? And that is a very valid point, because that's honestly a much more safer entry model from compared to me just trying to pick the bottom, where if I were to just get in off the high day move up, I would be getting in after the news. And also, I'd also be getting in off of this candle to where the trade still works out perfectly, except I'm not taking any unnecessary drawdown. So that's also another note that I would like to kind of like take away from this trading day. And then if we go into the next trade that I actually took on that Thursday, which was another trade that I took on an eval, not a funded account, which again, I regret. But the basic reason why we took this trade is because, like I said, bulls are in, baby. Last time we touched this, we bounced off the support level. Yeah, Trump messed us up. But at the same time, every single time we interact with the support level, we tend to make runs for all-time highs. And that's exactly what we do. And so basically, we're looking at the 15-minute chart. We see these higher highs, higher lows. Buyers are holding the start of future session of VWAP. And then we see a little bit more information here on the lower time frame on the 2-minute chart. We get a nice run up. We make a nice pullback. We break the high of day, fall back below it, form a nice higher low, and then break it for a second time. So off of that second break, I then want to kind of get in and then ride this thing higher to make some higher highs if we can. And I have my stop loss down here at the 6308 level just to cover this previous pivot down there. But these are the trades to where they're easy, repeatable, and they tend to work because we're not picking the bottom. But going into the two trades that I should have and could have taken, again, is at the New York Open. We just made a higher high overnight, like around 9 a.m. We're pulling back into the open. We see that prices start to consolidate here, and buyers are, again, once again, holding the start of the future session VWAP. We anchor a high day VWAP here. As soon as we get a nice candle break and closure above the high day anchor VWAP, we can then get in. You see how this this black candle, which is my bullish candles, this candle right here closed wonderfully, broke above the high day anchored VWAP, and we closed above it. And then from here, I can just go ahead and get in at 63.08 in the third. And then, I mean, this trade just works out incredibly fast. I really wouldn't want my stop to be down here at the opening range low just because the opening can be a little bit volatile and it may take a little bit of drawdown. Luckily, in this trade markup, you don't. But essentially, just to be safe, you do want to cover previous structure that is proven to be a higher low because we don't know this is a higher low until we break this higher high. Then you have, okay, this was an higher low, but you can't predict that. So the safest thing is just to have it at previous structure. But if you're in a trade kind of like the one that we actually took to where the last high low is way below you, then you kind of do want to just be patient, wait for a little bit extra confirmation. Once you start seeing these shelves, then you be like, okay, now I can actually kind of somewhat safely put my stop there. But moving on to the next trade that we marked up is pretty much the same exact trade that we took, except this time we're taking the first high of day break. And you definitely want to kind of give this trade a little bit more breathing room. I did mark up this trade with a bit of a type stop loss. But again, if we did break this structure, it wouldn't completely invalidate the trade. It would just really suck. And we would need to be willing to get back in. So it's not a bad idea to maybe just give it a bit more breathing room. And then if we move on to Friday. This was a day to where only one trade setup presented all day. And if you missed it, you would have been really upset. Now, I know a ton of people probably got in short somewhere around here, but I personally did not just because of how kind of sideways we are. And again, the news candle shook us out, and this just kind of looks like barcode action to me. It's not as clear as, again, how previous days were, or even how clean this setup is right now. So basically, we see that sellers have been in control. We just made all-time highs overnight. We're up at the highest prices. I don't want to be a buyer all the way up there, especially when, guess what price has been doing? What's the most relevant trend? Well, in the 15-minute, price is kind of moving down, and it continues to move down. So I'm not going to try to be Mr. Smart Pants and predict the bottom and try to catch this, especially buying all the way up here. Maybe if we were down low, maybe, but again, that's still not the best setups in the world, considering you have a nice clean entry model, just taking the low day and high day anchor view up breakouts. But essentially, price is moving lower. We're up at all-time highs. You want to be a seller up here. The open, we're kind of seeing it moving lower. We are seeing buyers kind of fight with some nice strong candles here, but essentially they lose the battle and then price tanks below. Price consolidates. This is the first move, the first leg. We make a quick pause. Now we're pulling back to get ready to make the second leg, and you bet your butt, I want to be in that thing. So we can't quite make it to the start of the future session VWAP, but we still reject the New York VWAP quite nicely. And so we get a nice candle closure below the low of day anchored VWAP. Now, obviously, this candle doesn't look as nice as this candle closure does, but at the same time, I like how price is kind of like fighting to get that close below. Was my entry a little bit early? Yes, but if I didn't take this entry with this particular trade, it wouldn't have worked out as well because the day quite literally just ended chopping around from 63.33, or sorry, 63.30 to 63.24, and it just kept chopping all the way until the end of the day. But this is quite literally the only setup that you can honestly catch this day. Now, if you enjoyed this video and would like to see others, well, you can find them right there. But please feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit that like button, as it helps me a ton and it's totally free.